Shalom, friends. Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson here, Dean of the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies at American Jewish University. As we're moving into an election in the United States, perhaps the most important election in our entire lives, I know that everyone's emotions are really high. I know that people's feelings are very deep, and we all have very strong convictions about what's wrong and what needs to happen. Seems to me that one of the roles of religion today, if it's doing its job, is not necessarily just to weigh in on how to vote for a candidate or who's the good guys and who are the bad guys. The real issue is what constitutes the decision making. How do we decide what's the responsible position to take, or who's the responsible person to support, and what are the boundaries of it? Even if someone supports the right position, does their character disable them? Does something that they've said or the way they've treated a group of people marginalize them and make them no longer possible as candidates? The Torah, not surprisingly, has something to say about what's at the very core of public life and public service. God has decided in this week's Parsha, we're in Parshat VaYera, towards the beginning of the book of Genesis, that something has to be done about the cities of Sodom and Amorah. There is so much injustice. They are so cruel to the poor that God can no longer tolerate it. He says that the cries of the poor have risen up to God, and God is going to do something to wipe out that city, which is so steeped in corruption and privilege that they don't take care of their own. But the question is, does God tell Abraham or not in advance? And God has this remarkable soliloquy in which God is like talking just to God and says, well, shouldn't I don't need to hide this from Abraham, because Abraham is going to be himself a great and populous nation. And then God defines for us what it means to really be a child of God. What does it mean to be a public servant in God's image? God says, V'shamru derech Adonai la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat Leman havi Adonai el Avraham et asher diber alav. I have singled out Abraham that he can instruct his children and posterity to keep the way of the Lord. And what is the way of the Lord? Here's what I want you to listen to. According to the Bible, the way of the Lord is to do justice and to advance equity. La'asot tzedakah u'mishpat. In order that the Lord may bring about for Abraham what was promised him. Now, what's striking here is God doesn't say who does the way of the Lord by offering sacrifices, by praying extensively, by wearing religious garments, by chanting all the time, all of which are beautiful and important supportive acts to deliver the product. But the product is justice and equity, tzedakah u'mishpat. So, for those of us who voted, for those of us who are still going to vote, can we make that our yardstick? Who is the candidate who embodies the positions that advance a society that circles around justice, how we treat the poor, how we care for the planet, how we include those who have been marginalized or neglected? Do we care for the widow and the orphan? These are the biblical ways to evaluate what constitutes God's way, and that ought to be our own. So, in the election, and as we recover from the election, let's remember to be brothers and sisters. Let's remember to treat each other with dignity and with love, and let's reaffirm our shared commitment always to be on the side of tzedakah u'mishpat, of justice and righteousness. Shalom.